You know how these days especially, people have a lot on their mind, right? It seems. What clarity is a simple understanding that can take things off your mind automatically without you having to do anything. So you have the presence and freedom and confidence to do what you need to do and have a beautiful life.
Well, how excited am I today? So super excited, delighted, honoured that we've got a very special guest in the studio today. I'll introduce him in a second, but I'm a big fanboy of my guest. So it's Jamie Smart. Now, Jamie is, I think, quite a prolific author now. We're going to talk about his new book in a second. And I'm a follower, it's kind of in the back, really. And I'm an admirer. So I'm not a rah-rah, Jamie, all over it, but quietly following in the background, learning loads from him and being hugely inspired by him. So Jamie, welcome, mate, and thank you for making the effort to get into the studio.
No, it's a pleasure to be here. I've really been looking forward to this conversation.
Okay, fabulous. Now, and you've arrived with no notes, mate. I mean, how do you know what you're going to say when you've got, look at me with my notes.
God, no idea. Don't know what you're going to ask, do I? So I could bring the wrong bloody notes.
Yeah. So obviously I've got Jamie's new book here. So if you're watching this, it's called Clarity. Clear mind, better performance, bigger results. I was delighted actually to get a sneaky preview. So Jamie sent me the PDF before it came out. So I thought we'd chew the fat around that, mate, around the new book. Obviously my first question is a cheeky little question because this is version 2 of Clarity. So has Clarity got clearer, Jamie?
It's definitely got clearer to me. Like when I wrote the first edition 10 years ago, I was a few years into this understanding and it had like profoundly changed my life and my work with clients. And I was just blown away by this understanding. So
we'll come back to what this understanding is in a minute, right? Yeah.
But 10 years later, I've had 10 years to road test it, to put it through its paces, to have more of my own insights and to see, all the different places where it shows up. So yeah, it's got clearer to me.
Yeah, right. And as a reader, because I love Clarity 1 and I love Results through the book that you did, and the Little Book of Clarity. So it's kind of been morphing over the years. Is this 10 years old?
10th anniversary edition.
Impressive.
Yeah,
that was impressive. Congrats on that. Because I'm coming at it, right? We'll come on to Clarity and what it all is and the 3 principles and Sid Banks and all that in a second. But I'm an academic, mate, right? I've got a PhD, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It took me 12 years, so I'm not very clever, but I did grind it out at Loughborough. And I was in positive psychology, and therefore as an academic, I describe academia like it's like a whack-a-mole principle. So what an academic does is come up with something new that inches something forward, a new theory, and then and they put it out there. Then all the other academics come and whack them up, going, no, that's not right. Yeah, that's not right. And therefore, then the new one comes forward, and gradually, through the whack-a-mole process, academia inches its way forward. And then we come to the 3 principles, which has also blown my mind. And you can't whack it. There isn't anything like, tell me, let's go back to the 3 principles. Tell me about what clarity, the bedrock of clarity is. And
yeah. So you know how these days especially, people have a lot on their mind, right? Yeah. It seems. What clarity is a simple understanding that can take things off your mind automatically without you having to do anything. So you have the presence and freedom and confidence to do what you need to do and have a beautiful life. So that's what
so cool. Just talking to you makes me relax, mate. You've got this kind of this way of talking, which is brilliant. Right, on that, I'm going to come back to that. But as soon as you say something, it sparked something in my head about people having too much on their mind. We did some work with some training, one of the supermarket chains, and one of their managers told me that sales of oranges have fallen by 40% in the last 5 years, right? Because people haven't got time to peel them. It's too much effort, or you haven't got time in your day to get your vitamin C. So, I mean, that's how stupidly busy. I mean, it's a ridiculous example, but that in terms of being crazy busy, and the weight of the world on your mind and having too many things to think about, I'm with you on that. So how can you have less on your mind? How can you let that weight drop?
Well, the funny thing is, and the book opens with a quote from Herbert Simon. He said, "What information consumes is rather obvious. It consumes the attention of its recipients. And so what we've got moment to moment, like the quality of our life in a way is the quality of our attention. If you have two people go on this beautiful holiday to this amazing vacation spot, one person's there totally soaking it up, having a beautiful experience. The other person's preoccupied with something. And so they have that experience instead. So my assertion is that you actually have an innate capacity to clear your mind. It's built in. And I've asked people all over the world, thousands of people, the same question. I've asked this to military personnel, prison inmates, CEOs, homemakers, therapists, coach. When do you get your best ideas? And the answer is always the same. Driving to and from work, out for a walk, on holiday, just before I drop off to sleep, when I wake up first thing in the morning. In the shower.
Yeah.
People get their best ideas when there's nothing on their mind, when their mind is at rest, and that's a built-in quality. So the interesting question actually becomes, okay, what is it that puts all that stuff on our mind then? And my assertion is the thing that puts stuff on our mind is what I'm calling the outside-in misunderstanding, which is the mistaken belief that we're feeling something other than kind of the energy of life moment to moment.
Okay, so we, because mate, I'm absolutely with you on all this. I'm absolutely with you, and this has been a massive revolution and an evolution for me as well. And yet, I still struggle to articulate what we're talking about here, right? So, what I think we're saying here is that for the vast majority of people wandering this planet, it really, really seems like I'm a person in here, and you're out there. There's a world out there, and I'm looking at that world through these little glass eyes on reality out there. And that's how the vast majority of people go their entire life, in that simple misunderstanding that's out there and I'm in here. Whereas what's inside out thinking then?
Well, so what you said is spot on. Not only do most people experience it like that, that's how it looks to me most of the time. Like I'm sitting here, it looks to me like I'm looking out through windows in my head and you're over there and the camera's over there, that sort of thing. And that's pretty practical. Like just coming here, I drove here and I walked here and that sort of thing. If it didn't look like that, I would have run into a bunch of stuff. So I'm glad that it looks like that.
Right.
But what's actually going on is like, it doesn't work like that. This is old neurology. This is like 170 years old. A guy called Hermann Helmholtz discovered that actually what's going on is data is pouring in through our senses. And then we're creating a guess at what's out there. Our deeper physiological and neurological and psychological properties kind of go, okay, based on all this data that's coming in, what must be out there? So we've all had that experience. You're walking down the street and you see your friend and you start waving at them and then they get a little closer and you realize it's not them and you pretend you're scratching their head or something. Well, it's not like you went, I bet there's a 50% chance that's Bobby. I'm going to start waving. No, you saw Bobby. And then when they got a little closer, you're like, I never met that person in my life. Like your system took a guess at what was out there, then presented it to you as reality. And this is going on 100% of the time, no exceptions. It's how our neurology is generating our experience. So moment to moment, 100% of our felt experience is being generated from within, using this power to create a 3D virtual reality. And I call that power the principle of thought.
Okay, my mind has already been blown, but I don't want to lose the viewers who might not be quite down the rabbit hole as far as you are. All right. So I'm going to come out of the rabbit hole a little bit there, because essentially we're saying there is no reality. It's all created from within. So I might come back to that.
Well, I'm not necessarily saying that. I think like I'm drinking this glass of water right now. For listeners, I've got a glass of water. I think there's a glass of water, like for practical purposes, that's the case. But my experience of it is being created from within. The visual experience of it, the sound when I put it on the table, the tactile sensory experience of it, that experience is being created from within.
But if we go down the David Eagleman route, he says, what does your brain see, hear, and feel, right? And of course, the answer to that is nothing, because your brain is enclosed in a dark, silent chamber. Right. So what we've got as human beings is these sensory organs that absolutely allow us to best guess what's out there. So the sound of the water going on the table there is this molecules vibrating that your ears are detecting and turning into the sound of water on a table, right? So
I'm with you.
And the smell of the seaside is but a bunch of molecules that are floating out there that are your olfactory senses detect and create that smells like the seaside. So essentially, everything is we are best guessing what's out there.
Sure.
But if we go back to non-duality, which essentially says that there is no out there, this is getting very deep very quickly, actually. I wish I'd maybe backtracked, right? But you aren't out there. There is no you as such. There is essentially everything is energy, right? Here's my thing, right? Everything is it's just energy. It's just a seething mass of energy out there in the universe. And we are part of that energy system.
For sure.
All right?
Yeah.
And the only way that form comes into being is entirely created in your head. So you are just a bunch of energy that until I look at you, I create Jamie Smart.
Your experience of it, but
yes.
I promise you,
you're there
I
anyway.
bumped into you in the street. I was having an experience. It looks to me like there's something going on there. We can make claims about what it is, but God knows what it is.
Yeah.
Can I give you my favorite example of non-duality?
Yeah.
So my girlfriend's got this little dog called Jack. He's a little black and gray Jackarpoo. And every night at a certain time when it gets dark out, he catches sight of his reflection in the French windows at the end of the living room and goes running towards it, barking, and leaps into the air to attack this dog that he can see in the window. Bumps into the window, falls to the floor, and then struts away like I showed that guy.
Yeah.
And every night I would laugh when he did that.
Yeah.
And I'd be like, that little dog doesn't realize that that's him. And then I was sitting there one day and I realized, oh no, that's not him. That's an image of him from a distance. And what you and I, there's this experiment. You can watch a video of it on YouTube, famous psychology experiment called the Rouge test. And what they do is they take a little baby, sit him in front of a mirror, and then they cover the mirror and they daub rouge on their face, and then they reveal the mirror again. Up until I think 6 or 8 months old, the child's non-reactive, maybe even older, maybe even a year, the child's non-reactive. And then at a certain age, once they see the rouge, they do that. But until then, they haven't identified themselves with that third person perspective on themselves. Now, it's interesting. You mentioned Sid Banks. He would refer to the ego as just an image of self-importance. He used those words. I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? I suddenly realized we learned that who we are is that third person perspective on ourselves, but that's not who you are. Who you are isn't you from 3 feet away or a meter away or 10 feet away. Who you are to yourself, who you were born being, is who you are from 0 millimeters away. And what we've done is we've been taught that who we are is that third person perspective, the mirror image, and that's not who we are to ourselves. And so from a non-dual perspective, how it looks to me is that who we are is who we are to ourselves, and then who we think we are is that mirror image, but that ain't you. That thing that's aging over time and that sometimes wakes up and you think I'm top of the world and other times think I'm a no good, you know what? Like that's an image of self. It's not who you really are.
Just dramatic pause. Just at that point, it's not who you really are. If I'm brave enough, I'll come back to who you really are. Meantime, back to Sid. I've mentioned Sid Banks. You've mentioned Sid Banks. Sid, I think, gets a mention in Clarity. Also, if I'm going to talk about my own book, I've got a book called The Little Book of Being Brilliant, which is the book that I've written that is closest aligned to Clarity. So I thought I'd bring it along. So Sid, for those who don't know, Sid Banks was just a normal Scottish bloke who had an insight, an epiphany, whatever you want to call it, that changed his life. And then the last 20 years of his life, he went around just talking about it and sort of had almost like disciples, really. He created quite a following. And Sid, so I've revisited Sid's work time and time again. And Sid says, don't listen to my words. He says, listen to the feeling, look for the feeling. Well, and for years I didn't get that. I think I'm beginning to get that now. What's your take on don't listen to my words, listen for the feeling?
Well, what Sid was pointing to, and I think something that's really profound actually, is he realized that every human being has an innate capacity for insight and realization. Like, it's built into us. And not only is it built into us, it's what we use when we're little to create our understanding of the world. And so all of us have had countless realizations. And a realization is a word that basically means your ideas about the world have come closer into alignment with reality. So Sid knew that the only thing that was going to make a difference to someone was their own insights, their own realizations. And what he saw was that one realization could profoundly transform your life. That's what happened to me, right? Like, I'm exploring this work back in 2009. First insight, oh, everything you've been looking for outside of you can only be found within. It's already there within you. Well, so I'm not talking about cool shoes and holidays. I'm talking about resilience, peace of mind, well-being, all that sort of stuff. The moment I realized that, my life was transformed.
But the mystics have been talking about that in India and China for Confucius for years.
And I'd read them and heard them and that sort of thing. The thing that, like, one way of looking at it is what Sid Banks saw was what the mystics have seen over millennia. The thing Sid had that those other guys didn't have was he had the metaphor of scientific principles. So you mentioned academia and whack-a-mole, and what they do is make incremental movements. They make incremental movements on a paradigm. And then once in a while, there's a paradigm shift where a new foundation is established for academia to then work incrementally forward on.
Agreed.
Well, realizing this as scientific principles, scientific, quote unquote, as principles, something that's already true, was a game changer, because at least how it looks to me is that was interesting. In the final chapter of Clarity, the new chapter, I wrote about an email I got from an Army veteran. And she said, I've had PTSD for 10 years. And she said, I've just read your book, Clarity, and I don't have PTSD anymore. She said, in 10 years of therapy and medication and all that sort of stuff, no one ever said to me, there's nothing wrong with you. You work perfectly. There's nothing wrong with you. And I did a follow-up with her 6 years later. She's like, still good.
Well, this takes me to a quote that I read pretty much from Clarity, I think. It says, where the problem often isn't the problem is the fundamental misunderstanding of how the human being operates. So PTSD, again, my understanding, I mean, and this sounds this sounds a bit harsh for people who think they've got PTSD, so don't want to make enemies out here. But essentially, PTSD is a recurring thought that brings back images and experiences as if you were there at the time. So normally it's army stuff, isn't it? So you come back from Iraq and you can't sleep and you're having flashbacks. And if you think about what that actually is and how traditional therapy would deal with that, would be sit yourself down and tell me about the trauma from 20 years ago. And every time you think of that trauma in this moment, you are reliving that trauma. So most people go to therapy and relive the same trauma over and over and over again. As I said, therapy is like going in the shower to dry off. It doesn't make any sense, does it? So, but a fundamental understanding, I think, that you're saying here, and that Sid is saying, and that Clarity is all about, and I'm hanging on to the coattails of, is that traumatic event is over. The only place it's alive is in your thinking in this moment.
Yeah, I think that's true. And what I would say is, because having worked with people who have been through traumatic experience, often it's kind of encoded in a habitual set of thoughts, feelings,
well,
muscle
wired,
contractions,
the neurons are wired together,
And so what I've seen when people heal from that, there's often a physical shift as well as a psychological shift. So I don't want to in any way to minimize the experience people are going through when they've got, severe traumatic diagnoses and that sort of thing. But what I do want to say is that can be profoundly cleared with a single realization, single insight.
Well, that's where I'm absolutely with you on that. Makes no sense for me makes no sense. And traditional therapists don't really like me. I once did a session to a bunch of psychologists, and they didn't like me at all because essentially I was telling them they'd got it all backwards and they're doing it all wrong, which isn't a great message for them when they spent 40 years learning that. But going back and what we seems to be traditional therapy, go back and unpick the trauma or rethink how you think about it. And clarity says you don't have to do that. All clarity is just the fundamental understanding that that's how emotions operate. Is your understanding that you are the thinker. That it's not what you're thinking. It's the fundamental understanding that you've created that thought and you are the thinker. And that fact alone, and it's worked with me to be fair, that fact alone has led me to live a much calmer life the last 5 years, and more in love with the people closest to me, more in love with life itself, because I know that I'm creating that experience. It sounds a bit woo-woo, but I tell you what, Jamie, it's so simple and so profound and so difficult to explain. Which is why I like you. Which is why I like you and wanted to get you in here, because I think you explain it better than anybody else on the planet. Do you listen to Rupert Spira?
I have listened to Rupert. Yeah,
I keep listening to Rupert. We're going to get Rupert in here one day, right? Rupert, I listen to every single podcast Rupert does on the assumption that one day I might understand something he's on about. But every time, half an hour later, nope, over my head again, Rupert, because he's genius, but he doesn't explain it to a mere mortal like me. Whereas I think you do, right? You do, and Michael Neal does, and all that. Those crowd do. Here's the question that started my PhD. So back in the day, traditional psychology, that's what I'd learned. That's what I thought I knew. I was doing whatever all the other psychologists did. Phobias, disorders, anxiety, depression. Tell me about your problem. Let's sort it out. Then I read, I think it was Robert Holden's book. And he posed a question: could you be happier even if nothing in the world around you changed? And that's kind of slightly throwaway sentence really resonated with me.
Yeah.
Like, could you, because I started to think in my little head, it's like, could you be, it's not a trick question, but you let it rattle around a couple of times. Could you be happier even nothing in the world around you changed? My answer to me, Jamie, was yes. And that was a sort of admission, if you like, a slightly guilty admission that the world didn't need to change. The world wasn't going to change to accommodate me. I had the potential to be happier, and yet I wasn't being. And therefore my clarity, my penny dropping was, therefore the biggest thing standing in the way of me feeling amazing was actually me. So that was my way into the 3 Ps and Sid's work and your work and Michael Neal's work and all that. But could you be happy? So we're the biggest barrier to our own happiness. So let me come to my gripe. I've got two gripes, right? First one is about traditional therapy that I've already articulated, is like going back into people's past to try and fix their past, all right, which doesn't make any sense because that's gone. What you need to do is just understand how you create feelings now by thinking about stuff, and a lot of it will go. My only gripe really with the principle stuff and with the clarity stuff is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but last time you were on our podcast, or last time I spoke to you, or last time I listened to your own podcast, you said that there are no techniques. So you didn't want to you weren't going to give me anything to do. You were just trying to create an environment where insight happens. And once I get it, then I'll fall in love with life. I'll understand how it works and I'll live a better life. But there are no techniques. My gripe with that, and you're coming from an NLP background, which is full of techniques. I'm coming out from positive psychology that's full of techniques, is it seems to be from the 3 principles community. There's a wide community out there who are all into clarity, and which I love, is that, how am I going to articulate this? Thoughts come randomly into your head. And I don't think they do. I think, and this is why I don't really like NLP, but I get the point of NLP and positive psychology. If you can source a better thought, and if you've got a continual stream of gratitude, love, kindness thoughts, there's techniques that you can do. So gratitude lists will help you source a better thought. Some NLP techniques like reframing will help you consistently rethink the thoughts that they're not randomly popping into, well, they are randomly popping into your head, but you've got a better chance you can do things that will give you a better chance of having a better thought. Is that not a technique? Where are your
They sound like techniques, but let me.
Yeah.
I'm perhaps clearer on my position on this than I was last time we spoke. I've got nothing to say about what people do. Like if you think about if you think about something like physics, physics doesn't care what people do. You can use if you understand the principles of physics, you can use that to build a hospital or to build a bomb or to build a car or to build. Physics doesn't care. So I've got nothing to say about how people use this understanding. It's my books and my work is primarily focused on helping people to see that this is going on, that this understanding exists. But when I'm coaching people, I'm using all my skills that I've developed over 25 years as a coach, therapist, trainer, that sort of thing. And I'm employing all of that real time, that sort of thing. And when I teach coaches, I might teach them different aspects of what I'm doing or how they can do this, that, or the other. But I've got nothing to say about what people should or shouldn't do. So if it makes sense to you to write gratitude lists, fill your boots. If it makes sense to you to do a vision board or to meditate or to do techniques, fill your boots. It's none of my business what you do. What I'm interested in is teaching, and how what people ask me what my job description is very simple. My job is to help create the conditions for people to have the insights and realizations that are going to change their life. And so I've found the more clear I am on that, and leading people into that possibility, the easier it is to do that. So that's what I'm up to. But I got nothing to say about what anyone else should or shouldn't do.
Okay. So your job is to create the environment where they have the insight, the realization, and then what they do with that is up to them.
Yeah.
I love it. I like that. I like that. Okay. Well, we've had the kind of, time up things, but I mean, you're too valuable to let you slip away. So just one last thing, and then maybe finish with the story. Is one of the other things I looked at in my research. So my research at Loughborough was essentially, instead of looking at illness, I decided to look at wellness. My slightly counterintuitive question was, who are the people who aren't ill? Who are the people who are already flourishing? Who are the ones who are feeling amazing? And not only who are they, but what are they doing that allows them to feel amazing? And thirdly, that we share on our team is like, what can we then learn from them that we can apply to ourselves? So we might also have a chance of having a spring in a step and a smile on our face in a world that's hell-bent on knocking it out of us, right? So that was my starting point, looking at what is working rather than what isn't working. And one of the angles that I went on was, if you're feeling amazing now, and I think, again, this is so clarity, really, if it's kind of obvious, but if you're feeling amazing right now, of course, that's good for you right now, but it also positively impacts on your past and your future. So the good feeling now, so if you're feeling amazing in this moment, all of a sudden, all your past isn't so bad after all. I did, those mistakes, well, they were learning opportunities. And if you're feeling amazing right now, your future seems doable, it seems bright. But if you're on a downer, and there's a lot of people listening to this and watching this are in a bad place right now. The world there's a shortage of happiness in the world. If you're upset in this moment or angry in this moment, all of a sudden your past looks bleak. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm such an idiot. It's no wonder, I'm not happy now because I've made all those mistakes. And the future, the dreams that you've got, like, oh, well, I'll never achieve those. So actually clarity in this moment opens up a happier past and a happier future. And I think that's so powerful, is that it time travels. So I don't know it's not a question. It's just like a sort of thought it was sort of trying to tap in with what I know with what you're writing about there.
Well, I really like it. And the thing that I've found to be incredibly helpful is knowing that even when I am having a low morning or whatever it might be, I just know that can change in a heartbeat. Like it used to look to me, Andy, like I would be having exactly what you described. I'd wake up in a bad mood or whatever it might be. And I'd be like, oh, well, that's because of all those things that happen. And that's because the future is so bleak and da-da-da-da-da. And that looked real to me. Now I know that if I'm in that feeling, that's just letting me know about where my head's at. And that's really useful to know, because then I'm like, okay, well, I'll just get on with my day. And before long, it's shifted. Yes.
You've not spent all day being upset. We're back to Sid's thing about you looking for the feeling, because the feeling, Sid's thing is the feeling, the way you're feeling is a 100% barometer of how you're thinking. So if you're not feeling it, you got some adjustments making your thinking. Okay. I mean, it's so cool, mate. And I could go on forever, and I've got lots of notes here. I'm just back from Thailand. I know it's a very famous golden Buddha story, but I did make it into one of my books, so I'm just going to retell it. And I went to Thailand. I went to the Royal Palace you've probably been to Bangkok. It's an amazing city, actually. Yeah. Now, it wasn't 30 years ago, but I revisited it 30 years later, and it's amazing. So Bangkok right now. And there was a particular golden Buddha. There's a lot of Buddhas. There's a lot of Buddhas and a lot of temples. We got a bit templed out.
Tens of thousands.
Oh man, everywhere. Yeah. Actually, it's in a place called Wat Pho in Bangkok. Is this little golden Buddha? It's about 6 foot tall, it's rock solid gold. And there's a bit of a lump of clay sits beside the Buddha. And first time I went, I saw it and I didn't get it. This time I specifically went and made a beeline to see the golden Buddha, because the backstory is that rock solid golden Buddha used to be in some monastery in the jungle up in northern Thailand. The monks were looking after it, and they heard that there was some bandits, some robbers who were coming to raid the temple. So they thought, well, we don't want to lose the Buddha. So they caked it in about a foot of clay. Mm-hmm. So disguised the golden Buddha as a clay Buddha, because they thought that nobody's going to steal a clay Buddha. And kind of good news and bad news. So the good news is the plan worked, and the robbers just thought, we don't need a clay Buddha. But all the monks were bad news. All the monks were slaughtered, so nobody knew there was gold in the Buddha. So 100 years later, a bunch of archaeologists, I'm thinking Indiana Jones, comes through the jungle. It's all overgrown, and they see the clay Buddha, and they think that'll look really good in our museum. So they try and winch it onto their wagon to take it back to Bangkok. But of course, they think it's clay. It's about 10 tons. It falls to the floor, little crack in the clay, and the gold shines through. Mm. And obviously the rest of the thing is like they then spend 2 days chipping off all the clay to reveal the golden Buddha that now sits in Wat Pho in Bangkok. And I love that as a metaphor, because I think what clarity is getting at, and what the 3 principles is getting at, is that we're all the gold Buddha. Mm. That's how we started. We are this pure, amazing, radiating, shining, brilliant human being that gradually gets covered over with layers and layers of thinking, and we have to behave how other people think we should behave, and we learn to dress, and we learn to put ourselves down, and we learn to think negatively. So I think what your book does, and hopefully what our work also does, is like chipping away at the clay to get back to who we truly are. Is what you said earlier. Yeah. Who are we really? We are the golden Buddha.
I just love that story. And the thing that strikes me is, when people read clarity, that will help chip away, but it really helps to know that it's already there. Otherwise, you just go around chipping at all those other Buddhas that don't have gold in them.
All right.
So it's like knowing it's already there. That's the key.
You take the story, the metaphor, and stretch it to somewhere beautiful. I love it. Well, I'll stretch it even further then, because I think that understanding that everybody else is also the golden Buddha. Yeah. So what you're doing with clarity and with your coaching is helping other people chip off, and get back to who we truly are. Yeah. And I just think we come full circle. The world is it's a tough place. Right? I don't know when people are listening to this, but right now as we're recording this, there's lots of stuff going on in the world that isn't great. Mm. And I think people have forgotten that they are the golden Buddha inside. So thanks for reminding them, mate. And thanks for writing your books. And I guess in 10 years' time, there'll be Clarity 3. Well, when it's...
Fingers crossed.
Well, you'll be floating, mate. You'll be off the ground there with your legs crossed.
I'm still here. It's a good day.
Okay. So Jamie Smart, thanks ever so much for giving up your time. I really, really enjoyed it. It's gone on longer than all the other podcasts that we've ever done, because it's been truly worthwhile. Thanks, fella.
Thanks, Andy.
Thanks for listening to the Art of Brilliance podcast. If you've enjoyed it, please subscribe and tell the world. A nice review would make our day. That's the very best way of getting like-minded people to tune into our very simple messages about happiness and human flourishing. If you've hated it, please keep quiet. Remember, the world has enough negativity already. Feel free to check out our training and the little shop of happiness at artofbrilliance.co.uk. Thanks again. See you next time for another amazing episode.